Record. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Plugin School. I'm Christina LaFay. This week we are going over building advanced plugins. Last week we built plugins using basic mode, which is a great way to get started with writing plugins using natural language and not worrying too much about very technical stuff. Oh, and because it's come up before, if your screen doesn't look like mine, don't worry about it. Your Sudowrite screen probably looks pink unless you decided to change the theme. I used the dark theme because it's easier on my eyes, so that's why everything is black here with white writing. Now, this is the plugin default screen. You can reach it by, got a bar in the way here. Plugins right here. If you go to explore plugins, it will bring you there. I just have it open in another tab because I have it bookmarked. I find it a lot easier that way. I always have a plugins tab open when I'm writing or editing because that just makes it easier to look up the instructions for each different plugin. But today we're going to create one. So we're gonna press this button here to create a plugin. And now we have the things we went over last week. We need to choose a name. We need to choose a description. We can decide if we want people to be able to see our plugin in the directory or only if they're given a link for it. And you can determine whether you want to hide your instructions or have them visible for everybody to see. You also need to choose a category, write the instructions. This is all basic stuff that we went over last week. But this week we're clicking this button here for advanced, and we're going to find more options. So I think the thing we discussed before the recording started, that multi-step plugin is going to be too complicated for the class. Oh, how do you get to this page on plugin? Okay. This is the plugins page, the directory, which you can get to. The zoom bar gets in my way all the time. Just by clicking on explore plugins, it will take you to the page. I have it open in a separate tab so that I can go back and forth between my document and the plugins page. And then over here we have the create plugin button, and that's how we get here. So since we didn't have any suggestions that I thought I could accomplish in the time we have in class, do we want to go for something with narrative and plot, character development, editing and revision, scene enhancement, world building, analysis and feedback, marketing, genre specific? I am not good with multilingual, so that's not going to be something we're doing. Editing and revision, everybody loves editing and revision. So, okay. Hard part is figuring out what other people haven't done yet. So what are some issues everybody runs up against with editing and revision, that maybe it's a problem we can solve with a plugin today? When you say comparing pros,
Well, I know there's a thing called kit bashing, as
Yes.
a prompt for that already, but it's when you've got multiple. What I tend to do when I generate prose is I put it through a speaker. I let it read it back to me because it gets me through it much quicker if I can hear it. But I've
Ah,
tried to
yeah.
use the Kit Basher, but I find that a bit mind bending sometimes. That's I just wondered if there's any other methods that could be come up with to go through your prose a little bit more easily. I mean, one thing I did was to number so when I got my prose generated, I just used auto number. I put it into Word and just say number all the items. And then when
Ah,
it reads it back, it also reads the number. And then I'd just make a note of whether to keep that number or drop it. So as it's reading it back, it's reading the numbers. And I just say no, yes, no, yes, it's in my on a piece of paper. And then I go back and take certain things out. So but I didn't just know whether there's any other method with a prompt to make it easier to just review the text, especially got 3,000-4,000 words or whatever to go through. It's can be quite tedious.
um, I'm wondering if maybe we can go over how I already built this one plugin here.
Okay.
Um, I I was trying to kit bash and had issues with the different models repeating themselves, and it especially happened when trying to um, kit bash multiple models, what they generated, and
Yeah.
then you still have repeated passages
Yeah.
when you get done with that. So the name I chose um, was "Stop Repeating Yourself, Rewrite." As I mentioned last week and the week before, I like the use of emojis in plugin titles because they make them easier to identify in your list of plugins on your screen when you're writing. Um, because if you have a lot of them in like added, it can get a bit tedious to find what you're looking for unless you happen to know that it has a certain plugin or a certain emoji that it starts with.
Okay.
Um, and then, as I've mentioned, I add the sparkle at the end to indicate that it's mine. Nobody else seems to have picked up on that, but I would totally love if like certain plugin authors chose emojis to indicate that this is theirs too, because that would be that would be fun. Um, Description, we will get back to this. Visibility, this one is published so that everybody can see it in the directory. You don't have to have a direct link to it. If you go to the editing and revision category, you can see it. I've hidden the instructions because they got a little complicated, and did they get complicated, or I'm just thinking that? Um, I just I just hid them. Um, but the things we need to go through that's different from building a basic plugin, because we still had to worry about naming it, describing it, whether we wanted to make it visible to everybody in the directory, whether we wanted to show everybody the instructions, choose the category, write the instructions, and enable story data or story Bible is what that's meant to say. We'll just clean that up. Now, for the advanced mode, the plugin fields, we want to make sure the new stuff. Um, Now we have new fields to worry about in here once you start scrolling down, that you did not see when we were building basic plugins, because it is more complex when you build a plugin in advanced mode. Um, if you use preceding text as a variable in your prompt, and a lot of people do, it's used by default. Um, you choose a minimum number of words for the preceding text and a maximum number of words. If you want to make sure that somebody uses preceding text, because that's how your plugin works, you're going to want to change the number from 0. What? I didn't realize it would scroll with my mouse. Okay. I do not use preceding text in this, so I didn't really care what the minimum and maximum words for preceding text were. For highlighted text, however, it is very important, if you're highlighting text, to know how high you can go within the limits of the model of the plugin you're using, which is something when we scroll down, we're going to see it. There are all these additional variables you can use in your plugin. In basic mode, it was just highlighted in preceding text. And then if you wanted to use check marks to indicate brain dump, genre, style, snaps, it did that all for you automatically by clicking the box. But if you're building in advanced mode, it shows you the actual code that you would be using. Does anybody have any questions about what the variables are?
I suppose you can't get at the detail of the credits used by those particular variables. So the
Credits.
each of those, could you actually display the credit values?
There's no way to determine exact credit values.
No.
However, that will depend upon which AI model you choose.
Yeah, definitely.
To write your plugins. Now, if you've never built an advanced plugin, this is what the AI options look like. By default, everything starts with GPT 3.5 Turbo. It describes it as this, saying latest chat GPT model, inexpensive, good at following instructions, may reject explicit content, works with up to about 3,000 words of input plus output. So if you use that model, which is what you are using if you're building a basic mode plugin, you can't highlight a large amount of text. I like building plugins that you can use to evaluate a whole chapter at a time. Yeah. So that is why I really like Mixtral Instruct as a model. It's described here as an innovative and inexpensive new model that incorporates 8 expert submodels. And what gets it for me is that it works with up to 24,000 words of input plus output. So if you're rewriting something in an editing plugin, you're going to want to make sure you have enough leeway to include your instructions from the plugin, the amount of text you're inputting from the variables, which in this case, this plugin used highlighted text, genre, and style. Now, those all go into the word count allowed by the model. So for that reason, I chose that there's a maximum word count of 10,000 words that you can highlight in order to use this plugin. That way, you highlight 10,000, it's going to rewrite your text to be about 10,000. Shrink ray. Yes, shrink ray is, it has a word minimum and maximum. I tried to use shrink ray on a 90,000 word document, and it didn't like that too much. It was like, no. But ShrinkRay is not a plugin. It is something, it's a native Sudowrite feature. I'm just looking in the chat and seeing about that. Sorry for the diversion. So, okay. So we have here, you have to give system instructions to the AI model that you choose, and then the user instructions. In the system, you are just giving the AI model parameters for what it will be doing. In this case, I said, you're a talented developmental editor with an award-winning track record for helping authors with the pacing of their stories by removing repetitive details. You don't have to get that specific. By default, it says something like, you are a helpful writing assistant who will follow the instructions of the user. I just jazzed it up a bit because I wanted to do a little more heavy lifting than just following the instructions of the user. But this is where you put the user instructions. When you're writing in basic mode, you don't have to see this part where here's a passage of text and then there's the code that will import the highlighted text from the document you're editing. So I should have opened. I'm going to duplicate this so that I can go in and find my Dracula. Because, you know, we can use Dracula because it's in the public domain. So this plugin that I'm showing you that I wrote, I'm sorry that we're not actually building a new one, but since what everybody was asking for was something that I already did, I thought it would be easier just to explain the process that I used here. So it's going to look at the highlighted text, it's going to look at the genre, and it's going to look at the style. So let's actually see if I filled those fields out, because the plugin will not work that well if I don't have the genre and style. And I don't believe that I did genre. Oh, horror, what it's a classic horror story. So I guess we'll go with classic horror. And the style, I don't know. We'll match style by, how many highlighted words do we have here? 5,000. Yeah, that's not going to work because you can only use up to 2,000 words for match my style. I have issues with my mouse, so I have to highlight using using my cursor and my keyboard sometimes. So, okay. Style. Match my style. Paste in writing sample. If you've never done this before in Story Bible, you have to make Story Bible active. It's turned off by default, and you just click the button here to make it available to you in your writing. I'm going to go to match my style, which allows you to paste in up to 2,000 words if you're writing. Your writing sample should match the style you want for this story. Bram Stoker wrote it, and we just want to analyze it to get his style right as we use this plugin. It will tell you about the tone and mood, the POV, vocabulary and word choice, sentence structure, pacing and rhythm, dialogue, descriptive style, whole bunch of things. However, the style box only allows 40 words. So what it's going to do when we click next is it's going to shrink all of that down into its bare bones so that we have just something in the style box. Here we go. First person POV of Jonathan Harker creates curious, observant tone with varied vocabulary, figurative language, and detailed sensory descriptions. Slow pacing and steady rhythm build foreboding mood, while sparse dialogue and recurring themes add depth to historical context of late 19th century Europe. And that's actually more than 40 words. So let's just, I'm going to change the and to an ampersand. That does not count as a word. And do that here too. There we go.
The other thing you can do there as well, I don't know if you've tried it, but you can put hyphens between where it says things like observant
Yes.
tone. If you put a
Yes, you
hyphen
can.
between them, it's one word, and if you varied vocabulary, just a hyphen, it'll become one word. So you can get you can double up your word counts pretty quick.
Yes, you can. Um, it can become a token issue when you're using plugins. So I just the yeah, I just use the ampersands when I can, and then hyphens if that doesn't quite do it. So now we can run the plugin because we'll have highlighted text, we'll have the genre, we'll have the style, and we did say that the maximum amount of words you can highlight is 10,000. So when I highlight everything we've got here, it's 5,000 and change. So we're well under the maximum for running this plugin. And it is called, forget what emoji I used, but we'll find, stop repeating yourself, rewrite. Now, I don't know if there's really all that much repetition in here, but we'll give it a try and see what we come up with. The plugin is working, so all right, here we go, the output. Original. The road was rugged, but we still seemed to fly over it with feverish haste. I could see now the green grass under the trees, spangled with the fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of the middle land ran the road. That's Bram Stoker's original text, and it removed 39 words by turning it into the road was rugged, but we flew over it with feverish haste. Green grass and pine woods flashed past us. Green hills of the middle land rolled before us, and in their valleys, roads disappeared into wooded curves. So we didn't have too much that it decided was repetitive in here. It just shrunk it a little bit. It did not rewrite the entire document, but since it didn't find anything else that it considered too repetitive based on my instructions, it only saved us 39 words. However, if you're kit bashing, you're going to find it rewrites a lot more. Unfortunately, I didn't think I was going to be using this plugin today for a demonstration, so I don't have a document with kit bashing stuff ready to go. But we'll go over the instructions that I did give to this plugin so that it would do what we want it to do. I have referencing both genre and style to inform your choices. Analyze the highlighted text. Only rewrite the highlighted text, remove repetitive descriptions or sequences to improve the pacing of the narrative. Do maintain vivid descriptions that are appearing in the text for the first time. I wrote it like that because in other classes, 201s and even 101s and 301s, you find that if you have in the character description that somebody has piercing blue eyes, every time that character is looking at something or looking at someone, it's going to mention their piercing blue eyes. This plugin will make sure that it only says it once. And it's not every time. Don't alter any text that isn't bogging down the pacing with repetition. Don't alter dialogue that appears inside quotation marks. I thought that was important for this plugin because we I didn't want it to change my character dialogue that I'd thought out. You know, I considered my words very carefully, and I liked the dialogue, but it was the prose surrounding the dialogue that I needed to cut out. Um, have only removed repetitive passages, leaving the rest of the narrative intact. After you have finished rewriting the passage, list the number of words you removed. I did that as just a quality of life thing. It does not matter if you use capital letters. I do that just for my own benefit because I do go back and have to edit plugins from time to time because there have been changes with how the different models work, or something is off, something is broken, and it needs to be fixed, and I need to figure out what the problem was. Having capitalized letters to show me that I have do's and don'ts lets me know where I should look to see if I accidentally told it to do something and it's following my instructions to the letter, but that's not quite ideal for people using the plugin. So that's a coding thing. I am not a coder or programmer, but it's very, so I don't come from that mindset. But I do know that you can use comments in line if you are a programmer, and just make it easier for yourself to know what a specific part of code does. This is just the watered down version of that. So, okay, we did minimum, maximum. I don't think I went over the description because I would like to tell people exactly what my plugins do. The first part, do you tend to piece together multiple versions of your chapters, aka kit bashing, to create a better narrative? Does that sometimes lead to accidentally repeating dialogue and descriptions? Can this result in bogged down pacing that may frustrate your readers? Yeah, me too. That's basically the marketing to get you to click through the plugin and decide if this is for you. There are loads of plugins out there for rewriting your text to remove repetition, but most of them were last edited when plugins were still in beta, and there were stricter limits on how much text you could highlight and rewrite. That was the problem I was looking to solve when I wrote this plugin. There are lots of great plugins that can remove repetition in your prose, but they're working with the GPT 3.5, which had the maximum of 3,000 words for both input and output. So that's not going to work for a whole chapter. So that's why I did this with Mistral Instruct. Actually, it's Mixtral, so we'll change that because I made a typo. And it's a relatively inexpensive model that allows up to 24,000 words of input plus output, including the plugin instructions and what you have written as your story Bible's genre and style boxes. It should be able to handle entire chapters up to 10,000 words, which I've set as a hard limit to ensure we don't overtax the model and get an error message. And that is the maximum here. Not all plugin writers will tell you all of these details. I wish that they were available by default, so you could see like what the maximum is you can use when using the plugin. I'm going to be teaching a best practices class at some point for writing your plugins. Because people have commented that they like how I do my descriptions. I use emojis again to draw attention. I'm sorry, I need to take a drink. My throat is very dry. Okay. Now, while you don't have to fill out the genre and style boxes in your story Bible, you may not get the type of results you're aiming for if you don't. So we didn't actually have to go back and fill in. Yes, rail. Is that how you pronounce it? Rail.
Sorry, just to take myself off mute. Yeah, the when you use the model there for the sizing, and you use the different models to your preferred one, can you have a different model for input versus output, or is it the same model that's used for both?
It's the same model that's used for
Oh,
both.
right, okay. Right, so if you have a
Yeah,
preferred model, then you have to be careful that it might not match the limitations and things. So
yeah. The because you can't give one model input and then expect a different model to output because
generate that.
they don't communicate with each other.
No,
Um, that like we were talking about earlier, you could do something with a multi step
stage.
prompt
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
plugin. However, you don't get to see what it creates in between steps.
Okay.
Um, so other things I tell plugin users, the plugin instructions specifically tell the AI not to rewrite anything that doesn't need to be rewritten, so you don't have to worry about losing any carefully crafted sentences that don't get repetitive and bogged down in the narrative. Um, an issue I found while testing this plugin, if you use a dinkus, which is when you use three dots as a break in your chapter, like three asterisks or three periods or dashes or whatever. That's called a dinkus. If you use those, the model will stop there and not finish the rest of your text. So remove a dinkus before running the plugin. That's just to stave off some frustration from people finding that the plugin doesn't keep reading their text. Because I was having that problem and I got very frustrated. In case the plugin does remove any of your favorite sentences, insert the resulting rewrite into your document below your original chapter, or copy the text and paste it into a new chapter. This way you can read and compare the before and after and rescue any prose you didn't want to lose. That's just a quality of life thing we have here. Obviously, it did not rewrite all 5,000 words of the text, so we weren't going to just replace all of this. But you could either choose, go down, scroll too far, go down to the end of the text, and I could just insert the output from the plugin right here. And then I'd go and search for this section in the prose up here, and I could replace it with the revised text. You can also just copy it to your clipboard, add a new document, and type it here. And there you have, oh, I forgot, it doesn't always use the formatting properly. So instead of just Control V, I think it's Control Shift V, yeah, and that will keep the formatting, including the line breaks. What is a good Kit Bash plugin? We can get to that after I get through the rest of the features that you need to pay attention to when building an advanced plugin. Let's see. If the plugin is working properly, it will tell you how many words it removed at the end. Oh, this was also to make sure, because I was having that problem with the dinkus when I was testing my plugin. I made it tell you how many words it removed. So if it cuts off before that, you know it ran into a problem and it did not finish creating the output if it doesn't tell you how many words were removed. That can happen if there's an issue with the LLM, in this case, Mixtral Instruct. If it's not working properly, you may just need to try again later. And that's something I wanted users to know, because me as the plugin author, I created this in order to use it. And, these were the problems I had, and I didn't want other people to have the same issues and just not know what was going on. Okay, so we went over the minimum and maximum words for highlighted text and preceding text. We talked about the different variables. You can use highlighted text, preceding text, brain dump, genre, style, synopsis, characters, and outline. I thought there were more variables you could use now. I'm not sure why they aren't displaying. I'll have to check into that later. But we went over the system instructions, the user instructions. We looked at the different, how you can choose different models. I believe next week we're going to go over what the different models do. We're gonna build a simple plugin at the start of class, and then we're just going to see, we're gonna do tests to see what the different models, how they interpret the instructions. Now these things here, temperature, frequency penalty, presence penalty, and everything below here, that's something you need to think about, because they aren't necessarily all that intuitive. What does temperature mean? What does frequency penalty mean? What does presence penalty mean? I had to look up the information because I wasn't entirely sure off the top of my head what each of them meant, even though I've looked it up in the past. Now, temperature will be a value between 0 and 1.0. The higher the value is, the more creative the AI will be in creating the output for you. The lower the number is, the more focused it will be on exactly what you told it to do. Frequency penalty. This has to do with the frequency of common words and phrases. You want a negative value if you want, right? If you put a negative value, it will be more likely to include cliches. And that's generally not something you're going to want to do unless you're doing some kind of satirical piece where you want, where it's part of the shtick. A positive value makes cliches less likely to occur in the output you get. Presence penalty, a negative value will make it stay on topic, while a positive value will allow it to introduce new ideas. Now, if you're writing a plugin that's generating prose and not just editing or whatever, those three things are a lot more crucial to consider what you want them to be. Now, for this plugin, because I wanted it to rewrite just to remove repetition, I turned the temperature down, I turned the frequency down, and I turned the presence penalty down because I didn't want it to change too much. I wanted it to stick with what it had to work with in our highlighted text, the genre, and the style. I didn't want it to be using cliches. We still have a positive value, but it's lower than, can you ask a plugin to write in the style of a particular author? You can. It depends on which model you choose among the engines, and the instructions you give it as to whether or not it knows who that author is. Now, the much easier way to do that would be not necessarily easier. I guess you would have to understand how the style box and everything works, but you can get that to work by like we did here with Bram Stoker's Dracula. I highlighted the text up to 2,000 words. I went to the style. I went to match my style. We pasted it in, and it came up with this description of the style that Bram Stoker wrote in. And that will tell the AI model you use for write or rewrite to use this exact style that Bram Stoker wrote with. You can do that with a plugin. I believe there are plugins that can do that for you, and we can look that up. We can look that up after we finish up with what we've got here with the rest of the AI options that I wanted to explain. Okay, so stop. This is something that I've never used the stop field here. Stop, and actually, let me just this plugins guide. You can get to it by clicking on this link that when you're creating a plugin, click on this link to read the plugin guide, and it will bring you to this page. There's a very helpful video here just introducing plugins. It answers a lot of basic questions, how to find plugins, how to add plugins. This is basically the shorter version of what these plugin school classes do. This is a text reference that you can use if you don't want to go back and watch the whole class again on YouTube or whatever. And the advanced editor is the part I needed to look up, because this is where it explained what all of these AI options mean. You can check this out for reference at any time, because like I said, it's right there at the top of the create plugin screen. You could just click here and it will bring you to this guide, and it will tell you exactly what each thing means. The engine, as we showed, you can select from different AI models. They recommend GPT 3.5 Turbo for most tasks, but GTP4 is the most capable. Also slower and a lot more expensive credit-wise. Temperature is the creativity dial. A high temperature of 1.0 makes the model's responses more random and creative, while a lower temperature like 0.1 makes them more focused and deterministic. They recommend 0.85 for most use cases. In my case, I chose a temperature of 0.2 because I wanted that really low. Frequency penalty controls how much the model avoids or prefers frequently used words or phrases. A negative value makes it more likely to use frequent words, while a positive value makes it avoid them. It's like asking a writer to avoid cliches. A positive value tells them to be more original and not use common phrases, while a negative value lets them use those familiar phrases freely. Now we turn down the frequency penalty to 0.25 so that it wasn't going to get super cliched on us. But also we didn't want to make it too overbearing about removing cliches, because maybe some of that was beneficial for our purposes here. Presence penalty, this adjusts the model's inclination to include new ideas or topics. A positive value encourages it to introduce new concepts, while a negative value makes it stick more closely to the topics already mentioned. Imagine instructing a teacher. A positive value tells them to bring up new topics often, while a negative one tells them to stay on the current topic. And for our purposes here, I made that value 0 because we didn't want it bringing up new topics, but we also didn't necessarily need to give it a negative value. Stop. Now this, like I said, this is a field I have never used when writing plugins, but it does exist. This parameter lets you specify words that, when generated by the model, will make it stop generating any further. For instance, if you set stop to be a period, the model would stop generating text as soon as it produces a period. It's like giving a speaker a cue. When you mention this word or symbol, wrap up your speech. Kind of like I'll be wrapping up the class because we're approaching 5 o'clock Eastern time. I can't think of a use case for this, but I'm sure there is one. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an option. The number of generations. I generally choose 1 for this because, like I said, I like selecting a whole chapter of text, and that uses up a lot of the words. Yeah, I don't know anybody. I'm sure somebody, there is a plugin that exists that uses the stop field, but I don't know what it is. Number of generations is the number of cards your plugin should generate. Each card is an independent run of your plugin and do not affect each other. Specifying more than 1 is useful if you want to give the user a diverse set of options to choose from. Note, multi-stage prompts require this to be 1. Cases where you might want to allow multiple cards. Oh, I did not know that Weaver will only do 1 card. So I guess that's model dependent as well. But where this might be useful is if you are allowing, 10,000 words of input, but you're only producing a shorter output, and you don't want you don't want your users to have to run the plugin multiple times sometimes, especially if it's an idea generator or it's a short feedback plugin or something like that, and it has a lot of input, and you don't want the user to have to run it multiple times because it will burn through the credits with all of the 10,000 words of input each time. So, but if you allow it to create multiple cards, then it doesn't have to process the input multiple times. It just has to process it once and then generates the output however many times you would like it to. It's kind of like when you're using the write or the rewrite feature on here. See, we have this text, and if we wanted to rewrite it and just say, let's make it show not tell. I'm just picking this as an example, so I can show you what cards are. Now, when you run show not tell, you don't just get it once, you get it twice, unless you've changed how your cards work in your settings. But this is 1 card here. It's 1 option you can choose for show not tell. Or you could use this one instead. And you can insert or copy, and that same thing will happen. Oh, my screen stopped. My screen sharing is paused. I'm not sure what that's all about. Have I lost anybody? Can you see my screen?
We can see it. It just froze after you highlighted a section of like 77 words.
Okay, so let's see if I can fix that. I'm going to stop sharing just momentarily, and then we'll start sharing the screen again. Gotta make sure I'm on what we want here. Okay, so we're sharing the screen again. Sorry about that. Okay, so now you can hopefully see the cards. When we ran show not tell, this is what I was talking about. It gives you two options, so that's two cards. And if you're writing a plugin, the number of generations for that would be 2. But you can choose 1, 2, or 3, unless you're using a certain model that doesn't allow more than 1 card, in which case stick with one generation. Maximum output, I'm not quite sure why I have this set at 4096. It's a large plugin, so we can have it produce up to 10,000 words. I'm just going to save that because that's a change. But yeah, also maximum output. The plugin will stop outputting words if it reaches this length, and it's best to choose that. And I scrolled again. It's best to choose a number for the maximum output that will work within the constraints of whatever model you chose. So what's that? Oh. Okay, and after writing your instructions and everything, you've chosen all the variables. We've got everything filled out here. We've got our name, our description, visibility, instructions, visibility, category, preceding text, highlighted text. We have our instructions for system and user. Thank you for stopping in. Sorry, this is running a little bit late. Have a good day. We have our instructions for the AI. We have the model we chose with the temperature, the frequency penalty, the presence penalty. We left stop alone because we didn't care about that. We only want it to generate one card of output, which can be up to 10,000 words in length because the model can support that. And why not? But before you publish it, you do want to test your plugin. In this case, what you paste here, for example, input would be your highlighted text. So we're going to go back to Dracula here, and we'll select, oh, you know what? We'll just select the whole chapter because it can. I'm going to paste that in here. Oh, that's right. I forgot we put the plugin output in here from before. Additional variables, since we do have genre and style in the instructions, we want to make sure we have the right information here. Now, they do pre-fill some of these with some dummy text, and you're going to want to change the dummy text if you're using your own text to run the test. Our style, just copy, oh, just press that button to copy it here. We'll replace the default text for style. Since we don't use the synopsis or the characters in here, I'm not going to bother replacing those, but they do have dummy text too. You only need to replace the dummy text to run your test for any of these that you've actually included in the instructions. So I forgot, you do have to scroll down past all of the fields with their dummy text to get to run test. And you always want to run a test of how your plugin works, just so that you know it's not broken. you didn't break anything. So when you run the test, prompt 1 will be, this is what you told it in the system instructions. And here is where you start getting the input from the user instructions. The dummy text doesn't affect things if you're not using those fields. Like for this one, we only specified that the plugin will refer to the style box and the genre box in addition to the highlighted text. So we don't need to worry about dummy text in characters or synopsis or outline because the plugin isn't going to bring that information in. It's irrelevant. But that is a good point. You only have to worry about the fields that are included in your plugin. So here's the highlighted text. It's this whole 5,000 words from Bram Stoker's Dracula. And then since we told it to bring in the genre, here's the genre, it's classic horror. The writing style, it brought in the stuff from the style box that we put in here. And here are the instructions it's following. In the card output, it chose a different passage that was repetitive today, or this time, than previously when we ran it in the document. The original text was, the driver, however, was not in the least disturbed. He kept turning his head to the left and right, but I could not see anything through the darkness. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint flickering blue flame. The driver saw it at the same moment. He at once checked the horses and, jumping to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. I did not know what to do, the less as the howling of the wolves grew closer. But while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without word took his seat, and we resumed our journey. Now, the plugin thought that was way too much. So it's like, here's what you should have written instead. The driver wasn't disturbed by the darkness or flickering blue flames. After spotting one on our left, he jumped off and vanished. Unsure what to do, I waited until he returned and climbed back into his seat without a word. We resumed our journey. So this wasn't the best example to run our test on because we're not actually kit bashing here, so it didn't have a whole lot of repetition to get rid of. When I originally tested this plugin, it got rid of entire paragraphs for me because it was just like, you know what, this is ridiculous. You don't need all this. It said it before. Yeah, plus Stoker has already been edited, and also were they still paying by the word when he got published? I know some authors from that period of time tended to be wordy because they were paid by the word. But yeah, used on unedited text, this would work. This would work a lot better. But it did do basically what we asked it to do, where it got rid of repetitive stuff and told us how many characters. Probably buy eggs and chickens too, yeah. Hey, you know, if you're living in 19th century, living as an author and maybe not making the best living, getting some chickens and eggs will keep you fed while you write more, right? So, but that is building an advanced plugin. There's a lot more to it than a basic plugin. Let's just duplicate this tab so we can go back and move this bar back to plugins. Here's a blank plugin screen again, so that we're not distracted by the text of my plugin. Again, all the different fields that we saw last week when writing basic plugins, plus these minimums and maximums These are the other variables that did not appear in the other list when I was editing the plugin there, to follow along with my outline for the class. You can also use scene summary. Is Story Bible active? You can give it instructions as to whether, if it's not, then do this, but if it is, then do this. And also they've recently added chapter beats as well. The beats associated with the current document, if any. I know that John's Cheaper Better Beats plugin uses chapter beats, while some of the earlier popular beat plugins could not, because that was not an available variable. Your system instructions, your user instructions. Now, to get to the more advanced options, you do have to click this arrow to choose your engine, to adjust the temperature or the frequency or the presence penalty, number of generations, maximum output. All of these things are what differentiate basic from advanced. And as you can see, it's a lot more powerful. You have a lot more options than when you're creating a basic plugin and this is all you have to work with. So there are a lot more knobs and dials and fiddly things in the advanced mode, but that also allows you to do so much more than we could with just a basic plugin. I think I'm going to stop recording so we can move to asking questions, because I don't want anybody to feel self-conscious about the questions they're asking. Thank you for coming. Next week we'll be choosing the best model for your plugins. We'll do some demos of how the different models work. Every Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, plus some change, we'll be doing Plugin School. Thank you.